Thank you, Christian. Good evening, everyone. So, is B2B marketing boring? I would actually say yes. I did raise my hand, but you weren't looking earlier, Neil. But I would not necessarily say it's the marketeer's fault, okay? Because I think it's the way we approach things that actually can make it quite boring. And I actually think that yes, as marketeers, we have a responsibility to make it exciting, to make it emotional. There's something actually even deeper that needs to be addressed, and that is the brand. Now, when I say brand, anyone's heard me speak before, they'll know that I'm not talking about a logo, set of fonts, and some colours. What I'm talking about is the meaning people attach to you and your offering. And what I do is branding, which is the management of that meaning. And I think that's not just marketing's job, right? Like, that's got to come from all parts of an organisation. That's got to come from the HR department just as much as it's got to come from marketing. And so when you understand brand in that way, in terms of the management of meaning, you'll realise that actually brands, they kind of start behaving like, almost like humans. It's kind of like we attach meaning to them, like we attach meaning to humans, because they speak a certain way. So you've got tone of voice and copy. They dress a certain way in the design. They behave in a certain way. Leadership has a responsibility with brand. It starts there. That, how is this brand going to behave? They do things for us as customers and consumers of those brands, and they exist on the basis of a set of beliefs. All of these things come together to create meaning in the audience's mind, not just the marketing. All of these other aspects. And so brand then is super important, I would say, to the modern business. And I would actually also probably state the claim that it's probably the most misunderstood aspect of business. Brand kind of emanates out and brings together a culture, and that should flow through your products and your services, right the way through to your customer experience, and then it comes on to your marketing and communications. And only then, if the other kind of areas are done correctly, can we get marketing to be super exciting, even in a B2B environment? So that was a bit of a preamble, but I kind of thought, how do I structure this? How do we create a standout culture? So I thought, I'm going to chuck some ideas out and see what you guys think, right? So I'm going to throw 3 strategies at you, and then you're going to say, well, they're all great strategies, Matt, but how on earth can we actually achieve some of these crazy, high-end, glorious things that you talk about? And so I'm going to present 3 key tools that excellent, this is what we need, thank you. 3 key tools which I kind of reach for often in helping to complete these strategies. So, let's start. Strategies. Nice big slide that says strategies so we know where we are. First, align the leadership. As I say, leadership has got to be the key, because the brand really starts with who we are, why we exist, why we started, where we're going, who we serve, why we serve them, and why it matters. And that is a leadership thing. And so what I like to do with businesses that I work with is it's quite a simple matrix. It's anyone knows Simon Sinek, and his start with why kind of stuff. Brilliant TED Talk if you've not watched it. Start with why. Why do you exist? What's the purpose behind why we all get out of bed, put on our shirts and come to work in the morning? How are we going to do it? What's our values? What's our mission? What are we doing? What exactly are we promising to people? And finally, the bit that Simon actually misses out is who. Who are we doing it for? Who do we exist to serve? Who is our audience? And I'll say a bit more about that later. There is Simon Sinek. He says, a lot of people know what they do, a lot of people know how they do it, but rarely do we find people who can explain why they do what they do. And weirdly, it's the why that's the emotional thing that pulls people towards a brand. It's that magnet that we were thinking about earlier. So having a purpose, a clearly defined purpose that everybody in the organisation can understand, led by the leaders. What about the idea of values? The one thing I hate about brand values is often they're kind of done as a tick box. Yep, we've rebranded. Here's our 8 values, which we now put in a drawer and no one ever looks at ever again. And that's the truth of branding, brand values. Unless, of course, you actually make it meaningful for people. And so there's ways you can actually make it more meaningful rather than just assessing them from a HR department on their their skill set. Why not consider how they're behaving and how they're performing in regards to the brand values? Because if you kind of don't set anything, if something pops up that's outside, you don't have a framework, if something pops up that's outside of those specific rules, then people don't know where to go. Whereas if you've given them guiding principles and champion and celebrate the fact that when they use their initiative and they behave in a way that there wasn't a rule for that, but they behaved in a way in accordance with the brand values, then they should be rewarded for it. When you do that, then obviously people can use their initiative. I'll just say one small thing on that. The other day, me and the family, and we don't often do this, but we were desperate. We went to Morrison's for Morrison's Cafe, right, for food. And we got in, it was quite late, we were really hungry, and it said a meal for a £5. I thought, that's great. So we got in, and I said, I'll have the gammon and eggs. And the guy went, I'm really sorry, we've run out of eggs. I said, I just walked past like a crate of eggs. He said, sorry, I can't do it. I said, why? He said, because we're not allowed to take them from over there. And I thought that was a prime example of where somebody they're following the rules, it wasn't his fault, but he wasn't given the freedom, and he should have been able to put the customer first, in my view, and I made that point very clear to him. But it made no difference, I got no words. Anyway, so number one, align the leadership. If we can align the leadership, it means that everything else can fit into place. Leaders cannot absolve themselves from this responsibility, in my view. The second thing is, as we started to lead on to this, is to nurture your people. Now, how many businesses have a employee journey map? This is something I think is super, super important, particularly as your organisation gets quite big. How does it start? Who are you recruiting? Are we even recruiting on the basis of the brand, its purpose, and its values, or are we just trying to find people that tick particular skill boxes? If we get this right, and we can use design, and I'll talk a bit about design thinking later, all the way through this to really kind of hone in and get brand thinking all the way through, it means that those people who are on the front lines, who actually represent the brand to the customer, it's those people that answer the telephone, deal with complaints. Those are the people that really give meaning to the customer, that really represent the brand. If they don't get the brand, then we're in trouble. And funnily enough, a recent report came out, and I've not got many of these, I could pepper them in, but I just thought this one was super useful. Employees who know what differentiates their company's brand. Only 41%. That means there's 60% of people that just think they don't really know what makes them different. And that is a leadership problem, I would say. And so it's the job of leaders to disseminate why people exist all the way down the chain. And tell that kind of meaningful nature of that to those people and help them believe it as well. And recruit on the back of it. So we need to, there's just 3 R's. I've got the 3 R's of kind of employee engagement. Rewards. So what are we doing to get that brand thinking into the formal award systems within businesses? What are we doing in terms of informal? How are we encouraging managers to informally champion brand thinking? Routines. What are our kind of routines for employees? What's our induction and onboarding routine? What's our appraisal system? What are our rituals as a business? And finally, reminders. What are our kind of reminders we're putting up around the office? And more in today's day and age, people aren't going into offices, right? They're actually online. So that's a massive challenge. How do we kind of keep reminding people of why we exist and the values that we stand for in and around our digital lives? I could speak about that a bit more, but we'd lose momentum. I'm going to keep going. So, the third point, and it might sound a bit kind of left wing coming out of the sides here, is to embrace innovation. Now, the reason why we've pulled that out as a kind of a key strategy is because really, in today's day and age, the only way to stop competing on price, the only way to really start getting super exciting is to differentiate. In fact, I was just talking to a couple of people earlier, and we were talking about the fact that it looks like they have 10,000 competitors in their B2B market space. And so what makes a customer go to them over anybody else? And it's a major challenge for businesses, in regards to that. And to really answer that question, your leadership does need to be aligned as to why it got out of, why it's formed and where the company's going. Aligning around something big, a big purpose that I truly believe in. That's the key to differentiation. Because then we say, okay, if we're really here to change the world, if we're really going to do that, then what actually are we putting in place to achieve that? So we have to know our audience. We have to know who we serve and what they want to become. It should be about the customer, not about what we want. And so often I say to people, so what's the objective of the business? And they're like, well, I want to turn over £10 million this year, or £50 million. And you say, well, that's great for you guys. But no one else cares, like what Neil was saying. No one cares apart from you. The customer doesn't care that you want to turn over £10 million. The customer cares about the meaning that they get out of purchasing from you. And so leadership needs to start putting the customer at the heart of everything. And so innovation needs to happen around the customer. You've got to look at your customer journey, you've got to look at your marketing, and you've got to consider the overriding meaning that you want people to attach all the way through, even into offboarding, because they might come back one day, right? How many businesses consider the offboarding experience that they give their customers, or they just slam the door in their face? So just a couple of little things on here. This is what I would define, and I've run quite a few creative teams in-house and in agency. This is what I would define as the number one enemy of innovation and creativity. It is this, it is fear. Any team needs to be able to come up with new ideas. And if you have disruptive people in the team shutting people's ideas down because they need to be the champion, you're not going to innovate, because people are going to start getting scared and they're not going to come with new ideas to the table. So what you need to do is you need to really unpack that and allow new ideas to happen. Leaders need to be okay with people coming up with new ideas that they maybe don't agree with, but they need to kind of allow that system of innovation to take place, because we need to really consider things from the customer's experience. Often we're in our little ivory boxes and we're producing a product, and then we run around trying to sell it to people. And I would suggest that's the wrong way around. What we need to do is say, we're here to serve this type of customer. This is our ideal customer. In fact, we need to get them in, we need to talk to them, we need to run workshops with them, we need to really understand who they are, what they want to become, and what they really want to identify with in our space. And ultimately, I think that's where we're going in terms of consumers and decision making. And I think this has happened in the B2C market, and it's starting to happen in the B2B market. In other words, we used to market on the back of the features of what we're selling was, the benefits, then it became all about them. Then it became the experience, and that's still very important. But more frequently, consumers are buying on the back of the identification. What does it mean if me, as the financial director of this business, buys your product? What does that say about me? When I go in to have my appraisal, and I say, well, I've decided to buy this B2B brand for these reasons, that says something about that decision maker. And so we have to think about what it makes the people that buy from us. It's a different way of thinking. And I'd suggest it completely flips the way that we consider business. So what does buying from us say about the customer? That's the key. Now, if we're thinking about all these things, suddenly marketing's not so boring in a B2B environment. Suddenly we're here in an emotional level with our customers. We understand them. We have to create, though, real meaning. That's what I would say, real branding. Branding isn't just a veneer. I used to hate it as a designer and a leader of a design agency when you used to go in and the customer would ask you to really create a beautiful visual language. And I can do that. We can do that, right? Most of us here, Neil can do that, with videos. But the key thing is that if the truth behind the veneer doesn't live up to the promise of that veneer, then two things are going to happen. Number one, customers are going to absolutely hate your guts because the truth will out and they're going to spread that around. And number two, your employees will soon start quitting, because as that distance grows between the truth and what you're promising, they as well are going to lose engagement. The brand has to be lived, it has to be true, it has to be real, it has to be meaningful. Mediocrity just will not work. So that's kind of the three sort of strategies. Align the leadership, we've got to nurture our people, and we've got to embrace change, we've got to embrace innovation. Because if we stop innovating, often closed down creative ideas. Our competitors, they're all going to be coming up with new ideas, and we're just going to stay exactly where we are. And so I would say the future is for businesses that can do that. Now, big white slide telling you you're halfway through. Are we doing all right for time? Just about?
Yeah.
We're all right. Okay. So, 3 tools. Now, this is the juicy bit, right? This is the bit Christians come for. Number 1, storytelling. I do a lot of stuff around storytelling and could talk about this quite a lot. These tools should be used in all 3 of those strategies I would suggest to you. What do I mean by, well, why would we even talk about storytelling? I mean, how fluffy is that, right? What does that mean to a business? Well, I would say to you that the way that we create meaning as humans is in the stories that we tell each other and ourselves. So, you know, we could go through the psychology of this. This is an article from Psychology Today. We buy on the back of our emotions. That's why the video stuff that the guys were showing earlier was so powerful, because if you can evoke the emotion of somebody sat at the other side of a desk, it's going to be powerful, because that's going to basically help them make a decision. Because what actually happens, as I'm sure we all know, is we buy on our gut instinct, on our emotion, and we try and back it up with the facts afterwards. So why lead with the facts? Lead with the emotion. How's this going to make you feel when you use this product? When you stand in front of your boss for your yearly appraisal? How is this going to take you to the next step? And so what we're told is that emotions that a brand evokes can be found in its narrative. This is the overarching story, who it is, what it means to the customer, why the customer should care. Brands are part of the person's story. And so what happens is, what they say is that all of us, everybody in this room, we will have our own pre-written story in our minds about ourselves that's been given to us from our culture, from our religion, from our upbringing, from our mum and dad, from whatever. And we have kind of a map in our minds of where we want to be in our lives. Now, if the reality of our lives reflects that story that we've written in our own minds, then we'll be pretty satisfied. If we think we're doing better than where we should be in that story, we're super happy. But if a part of our lives doesn't live up to that story that we believe in, then we'll feel really miserable and dissatisfied in that area. So the interesting thing about that is, of course, that we look around for things to reinforce our own story. We look around for brands that will help reinforce our story. If I think that I need this particular B2B kind of machine to help me fulfill where I need to be, then that I will go to brands that will tell me that story. This is going to make you more powerful, Matt. That's great. I'm going to get this brand. I'm going to buy into this machine. Has anyone heard of this? Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces. I'm going to put a little bit of theory in here. So, just a little bit. Joseph Campbell was a mythologist. He was actually a professor of literature. He studied thousands and thousands of stories. Bear in mind, these stories help create meaning in our minds. And he kind of mapped out a typical, he called it the monomyth. It's like a standard pattern, a beginning, middle, end, if you like. Aristotle was the first one to identify the beginning, middle, end. But this kind of takes it even further. And so we kind of have the hero in the status quo, and then she eventually comes out and goes into some sort of special world, has a major crisis they have to overcome, and then eventually as a result and returns back, and their world has changed in a great way, and now they're back again. And so this kind of idea is all about communicating change. Now, as marketeers, I would say to you, what are we trying to do? We are trying to change the customer's world for good for them. And so this is a powerful tool. I'm not going to go through it all, but what I find most useful is to consider this item here, number 2, the mentor in the story. Because that is where we are, because the customer is actually the hero. The customer's going through this change, the customer's changing their world, and they look in all the stories for a mentor to help them through. And by the way, just as a side note, George Lucas, who obviously did the Star Wars trilogy, he used Joseph Campbell's hero story to the letter pretty much in Star Wars. You can read all about that later if you wish. So, the customer is the hero. If we are a brand in the customer's story, what kind of mentor are we? Why are they coming to us emotionally in the story? What is their crisis? What's the problem that they have? And that's where we come on to this subject of archetypes. Now, a lot could be said here, but archetypes are super interesting. They were discovered by this chap, Carl Jung, who was a Swiss psychologist, psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. And he was around, I'm not a psychologist, right? So this is as good as it gets for me. But what he was doing was, he had a classical education. And so he understood myths in kind of Greece and ancient Rome and Babylon. And that was great, that was just part of his education. But he was speaking to very poor people in the Victorian era in Switzerland who were struggling with dreams and hallucinations. That's what he specialized in. And he was like, hang on a second, there's this, there were patterns that he came across from these people who were really struggling mentally with the ancient myths of ancient Rome and ancient Greece. And he saw these patterns, and he called these patterns archetypes. It was like he kept seeing them. And he thought, this is really, really weird. Like, this is cross-cultural, cross-time, this is a human thing. Now, it was about the same time as the theories that were being developed by Sigmund Freud. And Sigmund Freud was talking about these two things, the conscious and the unconscious. He was saying we make decisions because of stuff that's happened in our past that floats into our consciousness. And so if I don't know, something bad happened to you personally as a child, you might behave in a certain way in a certain situation. And the reason for that is because of what's happened in your past. All of those things are individually different. That's the argument. And that's true, and modern psychology uses that. But Jung was saying, hold on, there's something different here. There's something a little bit weird, because I'm finding stuff that's not individually different. I'm finding patterns that are across culture and across time in different types of people. So he called this the collective unconscious, and he and Jung and Sigmund Freud, they fell out about this. Freud was not interested. But modern psychology has adopted Jungian thinking, and archetypes live there in that kind of human nature, in that deep-seated area. I've waffled on about that quite a bit, I get too excited. But the key thing is that in stories, these archetypes, these patterns are amplified. And so what happens is, you come across 12 types of character. And they're kind of really, as I say, amplified in stories. You immediately understand who they are. You understand the explorer, you know, the Lara Croft that's going off to try and find something. You understand the magician who's going to transform things. You understand very easily the ruler, the calm, calculated ruler that's going to take you forward. And so what I find interesting is these are part of our mental makeup, these archetypes. So what I like to do is to work with leadership teams and say, look guys, you know, the customer is coming to you, you're the mentor for the customer. What kind of mentor are you? Which archetype do you sit in? Are they coming to you for care, for the caregiver, for example? And there's loads of exercises, and it's quite fun, I find, to do off the back of that. But the reason to use archetypes, of course, is that they help you to manage meaning. And I think they're one of the most powerful tools, because if you've got to communicate right from a grad coming into your company, right the way up to the board, why you exist, the type of personality you need. So why not harness an archetype to do that? And then, of course, once you understand, we are here, for example, as an explorer to help the customer get to that destination. Once you understand that, then it becomes so easy for them to communicate it outside to the customer. And so you can start living it. It's a very easy way of simplifying things. 2 quick tools. Design thinking. I'm an ex-designer, so I'm going to champion this a little bit. How do you make things better? You make things better through design. And I'm sort of defining design here as anybody that takes something and wants to improve it. That's how I'm defining design. Most people think, oh, I'm not a graphic designer, but I think the other Neil, wherever he is, he was saying that that creativity is a bit like that. Like, this exists in everybody. We want to improve things. Design sits in between what's happening today, and we imagine a better future. And so we have the tools, we've been doing it for years, and it's just starting to come into business now. Typically, the way that we tend to operate as businesses is in this sort of 2 states. We know stuff because of data and what's happened before, and therefore we base our decisions on what's safe, on what's happened before, on what we've been taught at university, on the spreadsheets. But design puts an extra stage in, the fun stage, the make stage. So between know and do, you have make. And what we do as designers is we like to play with stuff. We like to put stuff out. We like to try it on for size. And we're not scared to go out and say to customers, what do you think about this, guys? Like, do you like what we're doing over here? And we're not afraid of that. And businesses, I would say, need to start embracing much, much more this kind of validation, this playing, this testing sort of area, so that they can innovate more, so that the design thinking can come through. We've got to come up with loads of ideas. No ideas are wrong ideas, I would say, at the start. And then, of course, you hone back down on them. So at Cap 1, we used to use this double diamond process. I don't know if you've come across this before, but whenever you're looking at a problem, so you problemize, you define the problem, and then you open up potential solutions to that problem. No idea is a bad idea, and then you refine down. And as you're refining down, you're testing, you're making things, you're prototyping, you're putting it out there in front of customers. If it's an employee engagement thing, you're testing it with your employees. If it's a marketing thing, you're testing it out there, in a small sort of campaign, and then you're getting that data, you're learning from it, you're improving it, you're evolving it, and then you, once you've defined and very clearly defined that problem, you open up solutions, and then you come back down to deliver it. So no, make, do is a clear system there that can be used by business. The final thing I want to promote is something championed by a good friend and mentor of mine, Marty Newmeyer. I know Sean over there was also coached by him recently down in London. He's a Silicon Valley brand guru. And he sort of champions this. And I've been using it actually for quite a few years. And it's a buzzword, isn't it? Agile, or we're all agile. What does it actually mean? It's just talking about collaboration, okay? Swift, sharp collaboration techniques. Basically, conventional processes run like this, don't they? And, I'm in branding, so I know that often brand projects traditionally, conventionally go through this process. So step 1, and then there's a sign-off point. Step 2, then there's a sign-off point. Step 3, and there's all these, this could go out loads. The problem with this is often the people in step 1 don't ever speak to the people in step 3. And also there's a bottleneck after step 1 because we need to get that signed off. Unfortunately, no one actually knew that the CEO is actually on holiday for 3 weeks just when we need it signed off, so that's delayed. So typically what you find, do you not, is that rebrand projects, how long did yours take, Robin, that you told me the other day?
18 months.
About 18 months, between 6 to 18 months a full rebrand takes. And I think similar experience over there. Because we're doing it in this really old school way, and I think agencies, don't tell them if anyone's here, sorry, agencies can contribute to this. This is the future, I would say. It's more nimble, it's called agile. What is it? What if I said to you I could take an 18-month process and we could take it right down to 6 weeks? What would you say? You'd say, Matt, you're crazy, how would you do that? So you do it through agile. And the way you do it is you design with people, not for them. You don't give a brief out to a designer and they go in their black box and come out with something that's not quite right, and then there's back and forth over edits and changes and all this stuff. And that's what happens not just in graphic design, but on all the things I've been talking about now. Agile strategy is about huddling and sprinting. That's all it is. It's about coming together quick, making decisions quick, and then going and doing stuff. And so in the 6-week process I've talked about, at the heart of it, there would normally be a 1-week, fully dedicated time from leadership teams in a room with a facilitator, shameless plug, maybe me, and other experts in the room, and they would be focused on the problems at hand, and you would sprint through and you would get them done. And people say, Matt, how do you get a leadership team to give up 1 week of their time to all come together? And I say this, well, it's either 1 week in a short burst, or it's a prolonged every few hour meetings across 18 months. If you want to commit to something, let's do it. Let's change it. Let's do it great. And this is what I'm saying. Businesses can be boring because they are operating through this model. And actually what we need to do is start operating like this. This makes things more exciting. And it means that it's more collaborative, you hear more, you can work more with customers, and you get stuff done really, really quick. So design with people, not simply for people, is the message of that. So I hope you found those kind of ideas, those kind of tools interesting. As I say, I think brand should be at the heart of everything a business does, from the leaders all the way through. And it's only right towards the end, once we understand that meaning, why we exist, that really marketing can be held to account for being boring, because we are not boring. We are very, very exciting. My message, my parting message to you is manage your meaning. Thank you very much.
Stay with us, Matt. Anybody got any comments at all or questions?
Actually, Matt, I'm just curious about these workshops that you do the last 1 week. When you're designing it in real time, have you really got a team of senior managers who are leaning over your shoulders, staring at you while you're creating this element on the screen?
So,
It must be a nightmare.
well, there's a couple of things to think about. Obviously, it depends what you need to get done, right? But when I've done rebrand projects before, you're not always getting everything perfect. What you do in that 1 week is you do a lot of kind of strategy stuff. I'll talk about the purpose, get the leaders aligned, get the story right, all that stuff. And then towards the end, you're just testing it out. Does this feel right? And so by the time you get to that end bit, yes, you have got designers in the room, and yes, they are kind of doing stuff with the client, you know, or the management team around them. But it isn't like you're partnering with them. You're not kind of, they're not like, oh, just that's not right. You know, it's not judgmental. You're saying, well, look, it could look a bit like this. And sometimes it might even be sketches and stuff. We do prototyping in terms of websites and stuff like that. But it's only after that you've got your main kind of touch points prototyped out. It feels right. It fits with the meaning, the story that we want the customer to have. It fits with the strategy. And the beauty of it is that you keep that momentum going, and it's super exciting for leaders as well. Like, they love it. Like, I've I've had people say it's been the best business experience of their whole careers. And all we've done is sat in a room and just given a few frameworks to think about their existence. But the power of it is super helpful, and the speed of it is super. And I think it's the future for designing. Yeah.
Do you think you get some resistance from some designers in that process, and maybe more buy-in from, depending on how they like to work? Say, for example, in our agency, we might have a client call and say, well, can I just come in for half a day? And for some, they go, yeah, absolutely, it'll expedite things immeasurably. But some go, you know what, that's my biggest nightmare, having somebody sit next to me while I push things around on the screen.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one. I've come across that, you know, as creative director at a couple of agencies, and some people can't cope with it. So those high intensity workshop scenarios, they're not for them. But what I would say is, say in that 6 week process, for example, you have the multidisciplinary designers who are nuts like me, who like to do stuff in the moment in that 1 week, but there's still like other time, there's other sprint huddles that you can do behind the scenes to kind of execute on it. So yeah, I would say there's ways around it, and there's a place for designers that don't necessarily want to be, front of house. But in terms of my teams, I always used to, encourage collaboration, and this kind of idea of all coming together, maybe with mood boards, and then, them running off and doing a sprint and then coming back together. And what you find is when you start introducing that, the speed of things is quicker, and everybody aligns. They can see where they're all going, and I find that super, super exciting. But yeah, it's a different way of doing it, I guess.
How much technology do you use in that 1 week, or do you revert to old school paper, where you're in a room full of leaders?
What do you mean by technology? Like data and spreadsheets and?
Yeah, I mean, you're all set.
It depends. I've been in somewhere there's no computers at all, and they're almost like they've made it a rule. Like we're just going to keep the electronics at the side, and we're just going to do stuff. I've been in others where people have got their laptops up, and that really infuriates me. It's like, guys, come on, commit. And soon they go down once they see what we're talking about. But yeah. That's fine. We'll let you off. Everyone else knows. Super. Yeah. So technology-wise, you tend to just need, because basically the people that are facilitating that workshop, we usually have structure, right, and printed things that you can pin post-it notes up and stuff like that. I usually use a PowerPoint deck like you've seen today, but with exercises in, and then usually we call it the canvas. Everyone has a canvas, so there's canvases that you use to help kind of pin thoughts down and construct things up from. So, not massive tech.
So a lot of what you've just been talking about speeding the process up of creating a brand, do you think there's a benefit to slowing things down as well? As in, I think sometimes when you come up with something in a high pressure situation, sometimes just sleeping on it I know you're talking about lot longer time scales, but I just wondered whether you like the difference of.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, sleeping on it and validating it is one thing. Delays for just in terms of like 18 months, for example. Say it was an 18-month process. You're making decisions today that are going to be executed in 18 months' time. This is modern business. I don't think that modern businesses can afford 18 months in regards to that. They've got to operate in the marketplace at now, and if you want to lead, you've got to lead. Other people might get there first. So whilst, yes, a more calmer approach, I've probably presented it in a crazy way. It's not actually that crazy. There's time to think, and it's kind of a mastermind scenario because you're all thinking together on the problems. You're not rushing through it, but it just gets it done quicker. So I would say, what would I say? I'd say, yes, think about it, but at the same time, 18 months is too long. If that makes sense.
I work for a large corporate. Is there a middle ground? I'm just thinking about being able to get people in a room for a week. You'd have to book it in for like 2021. Is there a way to become more agile without going full?
Yeah, you could break that down. You could do half agile. So you could split it across six weeks, for example, or 5 weeks, couldn't you? And just have one day out, or you could you could do it that way. But I would say when that happens, you lose momentum. So what I do with leadership teams is it's kind of like, well, look, guys, if you really want to do this, you've got to commit to this process because it will be better for you. Because what happens say you space it out over 5 weeks, someone goes on holiday, someone's sick, something else comes up, another priority, whereas if they blanked it out, it's far more efficient for them. So that's my suggestion anyway. And I have done it that way. And then what I sometimes find is that then workshops start getting postponed because stuff pops up in the middle. And then you lose momentum. And so it's harder then to pick back up to execute on it, which I actually think happens over the long traditional process. If a leader sees it at the start and executes it, kicks it off, and they don't see it for 8 months, then stuff's changed in their mind as well. And then they see it and they're like, really? Is that where we've got to? And they're like, yeah, you briefed us on this 8 months ago. And they're like, well, I don't have that in mind. Surely you're wrong. And then it becomes this problem. So momentum in the room, everyone together, gets stuff done. Yes.
Kind of probably in support of what you're saying, do you find that if a project stretches out from around 18 months, the creativity gets taken out of it, where you get to the point where, from a designer's point of view, you just don't want to finish it now, the excitement's gone.
Yeah.
That's just from a designer's
That's the truth, isn't it? That's the truth that happens in teams.
Yeah.
That is the truth. And I've been in many teams where designers have come back from meetings like that I've not been in and just like slammed their pads down and gone, I'm just sick of this. Yeah. Just sick of this. I've designed this 8 times and every time it's not right. Why can't somebody just come and sit by my desk? I'm that sick of it and just tell me what to do. And that's not right, is it? That's not creativity.
You get more creative, innovative work if it's done in a lot shorter time.
Agreed. I mean, I think sometimes agencies. I mean, I ran 2 agencies, and I think one of the problems that we have. This is maybe something to think about if you're an agency. Is the way that we structure our pricing is based around hours, and so if you're in account management, it's beneficial to you to make things longer. It really is, because you're being paid by the hour. So the longer it takes, we can add loads of useless things into this process because we're going to get paid for it. That's great. But if you can break out of that somehow, and there are ways you can do it, then there's another way that you can price things in this kind of more agile kind of way, more value
I'd
based.
also like to say though, you can't rush creativity sometimes.
No.
It comes and happens
When it happens, right?
But
But often when there's a deadline, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
So you are right, but what I'm talking about in the 6-week process is just at that heart, that 1 week. Nothing has to be perfect at the end of that. It's just the general sort of direction. You've explored it, you've tried it on, the leaders are kind of happy, and then we can start executing from there on in. But it's a much quicker way of doing it, and they're on board. There's less back and forth. Okay, thank you everybody. Excellent. Let's just see how